Unsealed, ancient truth for a modern world. The seal is broken, revealing secrets long hidden. Wisdom from the past, now unveiled.
Hey everyone, welcome back to UNSEALED. Today, we are dismantling one of the most famous stories in human history. We've all seen the Sunday school illustrations. A cartoonish, talking green snake hanging from an apple tree, whispering to a naive woman. But what if I told you that almost everything we picture about Genesis 3 is a product of bad translation and lost ancient context? What if the creature in the garden wasn't a slimy reptile at all? Today, we're looking at what actually happened in Genesis 3. Let's dive in. Picture the scene. It's the cool of the day. God has just finished walking and talking with Adam and Eve in the garden. The air is peaceful. But then, God departs. Enter the serpent. He steps out from behind a tree, confronts Eve, and starts his conversation with a question. Did God actually say, "You shall not eat of any tree in the garden"? Notice the strategy here. The serpent knew exactly what God had told Adam, that they could eat from every single tree in the garden except one. So right out of the gate, we see a purposeful twisting of God's words. He takes God's wild abundance and reframes it to make him look restrictive and stingy, when in fact he was providing immensely. Now we've all been taught this story Sunday school style. Eve is having a casual chat with a literal crawling garden snake. But if you actually stop and think about it, that brings up some massive questions. Chief among them, why on earth wasn't Eve terrified or taken aback? If a gardener snake slithered up to you tomorrow and started debating theology, you wouldn't pull up a chair. You'd run for your life. That would be incredibly weird. Yet Eve doesn't blink. Keep in mind, the only other time in the entire Bible where an animal talks is Balaam's donkey. And that was a literal, jaw-dropping miracle. So what gives here? Why wasn't she afraid? To understand this, we need to look at the original language. The Hebrew word here for serpent is nachash. On the surface, yes, it simply translates to snake. But as has been proven countless times throughout the Bible, things usually aren't as simple as they appear. The word nachash actually has 3 distinct levels to it. Level 1 is a surface meaning, snake. In the ancient world, serpents weren't just pests. They were symbols of chaos, cleverness, and the spiritual underworld. Level 2 is the whisperer. If you use the root word as a verb, nachash, it means to practice divination or whisper spells. This creature isn't just making animal noises. He is acting as a deceptive medium, whispering secret, supernatural knowledge to Eve. This took the form of the serpent whispering, "You will be like God, and your eyes will be opened." The last level is level 3, and this means the shining one. The same root is used for nachash, which means bronze or shining metal. In biblical imagery, divine heavenly beings are almost always described as glowing or looking like burnished, shining bronze. When you put all three levels together, the picture becomes crystal clear. Eve wasn't talking to a slimy, crawling reptile on the ground. She was standing face to face with a glorious, shining celestial being, a shining one who was whispering deceptive, seemingly divine secrets to her. No wonder she wasn't scared. She thought she was talking to a trustworthy member of God's own heavenly council. If I haven't lost you, and you are still following me up to this point, you probably have a giant question mark in your mind. If this nachash was actually a glorious, shining celestial being, and not a garden variety reptile, why does God curse him in Genesis 3:14 by saying, "On your belly you shall go, and dust you shall eat all the days of your life"? On the surface, it sounds like God was doing a weird biology experiment, taking a creature that used to have legs and evolving it by removing them. But this isn't the case. We need to look into ancient Near Eastern imagery. In the ancient world, eating dust and falling on your belly were well-known everyday idioms. They didn't describe physical anatomy. They described absolute humiliation and defeat. Even today, we use physical metaphors to describe social status. If I say a corrupt politician was brought low, cast down, or dragged through the dirt, you don't think they were literally dragged through the mud. You know their status was ruined. That is exactly what is happening here. On your belly you shall go. This is the ultimate demotion. This shining, high-ranking member of the heavenly council is being cast out of the heavens and dragged down to the lowest possible realm, the dirt. The second half of that is the dust you shall eat. In ancient military language, when a king conquered his enemies, the defeated soldiers would bow so low their faces touched the ground. They literally licked the dust of the king's feet. It is a graphic picture of total subjugation. So God isn't doing a weird science experiment on reptile legs. He is pronouncing a sentence of cosmic demotion. The Shining One wanted to raise his throne above God's, but instead of being elevated, he is cast down to the dirt, relegated to the domain of death and decay. The very creature that tried to make humanity eat death is now sentenced to eat the dust of the earth. I want you to notice another fascinating detail in this scene of judgment. Only the serpent itself got cursed. Adam's consequence was that he would have to work harder to get food from the ground, and Eve's consequence was paid in childbearing. Even in their rebellion, God protected his image bearers, directing the ultimate curse entirely at the deceiver. This sets up the narrative for an all-out cosmic war, the opposing seeds. In Genesis 3:15, God turns to the serpent and puts enmity or total hostility between the serpent seed and the woman seed. The verse finishes with this prophetic declaration: "The serpent will bruise the heel of the woman's seed, but the woman's seed will bruise his head." Some have claimed this is the very first whisper of the gospel. When it speaks of the woman's seed bruising the serpent's head, it is referencing the fact that the serpent will try to take out Jesus. the only hope that humanity has for redemption, but that Jesus will ultimately be victorious. Think about the physics of the strike. The serpent strikes the heel. It's painful. It's a wound, but it's not fatal. This is exactly what happened at the cross. The serpent thought he had won when he orchestrated the crucifixion. He bit the heel. But to bite a heel, your head has to be directly under the foot. At the exact moment the enemy struck the heel, Jesus used that very same foot to crush the serpent's head, delivering the final, fatal blow to the kingdom of darkness. What looked like the defeat of humanity's only hope was actually the ultimate victory. This generational war wasn't just poetic metaphor locked away in the Old Testament. It was a literal reality that started in Genesis and played out directly during Jesus' earthly ministry. In John 8:38 through 47, Jesus finds himself in a fierce confrontation with a group of Pharisees. The Pharisees were relying on their DNA for salvation, claiming to be the true sons of Abraham because of their Jewish heritage. But Jesus completely dismantles their argument. He tells them that if they were truly sons of Abraham, they would act like Abraham. Instead, they were actively plotting to murder him simply because they hated the truth. Their defense was weak. They tried to pivot, arguing that they weren't born of sexual immorality and that they had one true Father, even God Himself. But Jesus pulls no punches in his rebuttal. He tells them that if God was truly their Father, they would love Him, not try to kill Him. And then He drops the ultimate bombshell, linking them directly back to the garden. You are of your father, the devil, and your will is to do your father's desires. He was a murderer from the beginning. Do you see what Jesus is doing here? He is identifying the Pharisees as the literal seed of the serpent. They were reproducing the exact same patterns of deception, accusation, and murder that the nachash unleashed in Genesis 3. The cosmic war that was declared in the dirt of Eden is the very same war Jesus fought on the streets of Jerusalem, and is the war that He won once and for all. So why does all of this ancient Hebrew and first century debate matter to you and me today? Because the strategy of the nachash hasn't changed. If you are waiting for temptation to show up looking like a terrifying, scaly monster, you're going to get tripped up every single time. The enemy doesn't show up in the dark very often. He shows up as a shining one, an angel of light. He wraps his lies in beauty, intellect, and spiritual sounding language. In fact, we see this confirmed in Ezekiel chapter 28. Starting in verse 13, the prophet addresses the human king of Tyre, but the language he uses quickly transitions into something far bigger than a mere mortal king. He describes this figure as a guardian cherub who was in Eden, the garden of God, adorned with every precious stone. It says that he was the signet of perfection, blameless in his ways, until unrighteousness was found in him, and he became proud because of his beauty. This raises a massive question. If the king of Tyre was just a human king, Why does the Bible say he was a guardian cherub in Eden? Was Ezekiel showing us that the prideful king of Tyre was operating under the direct influence of the original prideful rebel of the garden, the nachash? This passage perfectly reinforces the Shining One imagery. The enemy of our souls can present himself as beautiful, persuasive, and worthy of being highly exalted. And his whisper is still the exact same one he used on Eve. Did God really say? He wants you to believe that God is restrictive, that God is holding out on you, and that you are better off being your own God. But the good news of the gospel is that the war has already been decided. The heel was bitten, but the head was crushed. When we align ourselves with Jesus, we are standing on the side of the ultimate victor. As we wrap up today, take a moment to look back at the ground that we covered. We started in the dirt of Eden, looking at a story we thought we knew. We thought we were reading about a talking snake, but the Hebrew forced us to lift our eyes to see a cosmic shining rebel, a brilliant deceiver who knew exactly how to twist God's abundance into a lie. But we also saw that even when humanity fell for the whisper, God's immediate response wasn't to curse us, but to declare war on the one who deceived us. From the very first pages of Genesis, God was already writing the ending. He was already planning the moment the heel of his son would descend to crush the skull of the enemy. So the next time you feel the whisper of doubt or the pressure to step outside of God's boundaries, remember who you are standing with. You aren't fighting a losing battle against a terrifying monster. You are standing in the victory of the King, who has already brought the Shining One low, cast him down to the dust, and secured your redemption once and for all. If this episode opened your eyes or challenged the way you read the scriptures, do me a huge favor. Hit that subscribe button, leave a 5-star review, and share this episode with a friend who loves digging deep into the Word. Thank you for joining me on this journey. Every week, we uncover more of God's truth hidden in plain sight, and every step brings us closer to the one who is true. Until next time, keep your heart anchored in Scripture, your eyes open to the world around you, and your hands ready to live out what you have learned. If this episode helped you, share it with someone. And if you've got a topic you want me to explore, you can reach me through the links in the show notes.